書くの？
The anime kicks off with the untimely demise of Kazuma. Imagine, he's presented with two choices: head to the pearly gates or take a detour to a fantasy world. Of course, he opts for the latter, and that's when the trouble really begins. The goddess Aqua welcomes him with open arms, but her main mission for Kazuma is a doozy: defeat the Demon King. The catch? He gets to choose any weapon to aid him. So, what's his brilliant choice? None other than Aqua herself, and oh boy, he's been regretting that decision ever since. Now, not only is he stuck with a deity-turned-party archpriest who's about as useful as a wet noodle, but they've got to figure out how to make enough cash to get by in this fantasy realm. And just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, their ragtag group keeps growing as more problematic adventurers join their ranks. There's Megumin, the explosion magic specialist who can only cast one spell a day and refuses to learn anything else. Then there's Lalatina Darkness Dustiness Ford, their unwavering crusader with a peculiar taste for pain that makes Kazuma look like a saint in comparison. Buckle up, because Kazuma and this motley crew are in for countless adventures where making money is a struggle, and dealing with each other's quirky personalities is a whole other battle. But here's the kicker: things hardly ever go according to plan, and they often end up sidetracked by their own hilariously idiotic tendencies. Welcome to the wild ride that is their fantasy world. Kazuma, the guy destined to be the Demon King, found himself in a bit of a pickle. He'd been reincarnated into another world, and instead of living the dream, he was stuck in a jail cell, pining for good old Japan. And Ursina, the public prosecutor assigned by the kingdom to deal with Kazuma's case. She suspected him of subverting the state, and honestly, his friends weren't helping matters. They were all gathered around him, wearing guilty expressions, like they'd just finished a group apology tour. Sina dropped the bombshell: Kazuma had teleported a thing called coronadite that went boom in the residence of some lord. No casualties, mind you, but it sure left a mess. Kazuma and his friend blinked at each other, looking innocent as kittens caught in a yarn shop. Now the big question was whether Kazuma was a terrorist or a Demon King's minion. Kazuma, ever the charmer, responded with, "Lady, do you know who you're talking to? I'm the Demon King of the future." Megumi, the loyal sorcerer friend, jumped in to defend Kazuma, claiming that if it weren't for him, the destroyer's battle would have been an all-you-can-eat buffet of casualties. A real best friend right there. But Megumi didn't stop there. She went on to say that Kazuma hadn't committed any real crimes except for some minor infractions, like accidentally stepping on someone's foot or even taking someone's panties. At this point, Kazuma's being a Demon King's minion is gonna be the least of his concerns. Now, here comes Darkness, the wild card. She decided to vouch for Kazuma, though she couldn't help but mention how he'd never visited her bedside. Kazuma retorted, claiming that she'd been under the succubus's spell and made him do crazy things in the bath. Darkness wasn't having any of it and jumped right into a quarrel. Meanwhile, the others were just standing by, watching the spectacle like it was a soap opera. The crowd, on the other hand, started chanting that Kazuma was innocent and should be set free. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the prosecutor threatened to throw anyone who joined Kazuma in prison. The crowd fell silent, and his friends suddenly started acting like they'd been warning him all along not to blow things up. Talk about betrayal. Darkness, in her seductive manner, offered to join Kazuma in prison. But before anyone from the crowd could intervene, Aqua stepped forward. She had something to say but was promptly silenced. Kazuma warned them that if they didn't side with him, his guild friends would. He glanced at them, and they were all looking in different directions. Yet another betrayal. Cue Kazuma's tears in prison. But wait, there's hope. An explosion rang out, and there was Aqua at the cell window. She'd created the distraction to save him, but instead of making a clean escape, she just made things messier. She handed him a lockpick pin and a plan to escape to a nearby mansion. Perfect plan, right? Wrong. Kazuma realized the lock was a combination one, and in frustration, he tossed the lockpick away and went to sleep. Aqua waited outside, enduring the cold, and 2 days passed. Another explosion, and there was Aqua again, this time with a hacksaw. Kazuma still couldn't reach the window, and Aqua tried to enter, but the guards caught her. Kazuma should really learn from Aqua's unwavering optimism. He threw the hacksaw away and went back to sleep. A few days later, the prosecutor decided to interrogate him with a lie detector. She asked the toughest questions, ones that made Kazuma cry tears of despair. At first, he lied, but then a bell rang and he truthfully spilled his life story as person behind him recorded everything. As he talked about saving the town, the belle stayed silent, and the prosecutor apologized for buying into rumors. She softened up, and Kazuma saw his chance. He started getting furious with her, but then she got serious again, and Kazuma was back to square one. He attempted to ask if she had a boyfriend, but she quickly got back to business. Kazuma was once again the picture of innocence as she asked him about any connection to the demon lord. He denied it, but this time, the bell rang and her eyes narrowed suspiciously. The next day, Kazuma prepared for his execution trial, with Aqua, Megumi, and Darkness as his defense. However, they turned out to be more of a problem than a solution. The prosecutor questioned all three testimonies and seemed determined to prove him guilty. Just when things looked bleak, Kazuma saw an opening and declared his innocence, causing confusion as the bell failed to ring. The prosecutor's case crumbled, but the Lord intervened, threatening the judge. Darkness stepped in, revealing her dustiness family crest and offered to handle the trial herself. She promised to prove Kazuma innocent and, if she lost, to do anything for the Lord. The pervert lord's hopes soared upon seeing her seductive body, and the crowd began chanting in Kazuma's favor. The judge tried to silence them, but they wouldn't listen. In a fit of rage, he hurled his hammer at the crowd, achieving a perfect headshot on himself. Kazuma's trial got postponed again, and he returned to his mansion, fired up for his second chapter. But as luck would have it, the army arrived at his doorstep to seize all his assets to clear his debts. Kazuma watched as everything he owned was carted away. He ended up sleeping on the floor, tears streaming down his face, contemplating the not-so-promising start of his second chapter. Kazuma and Aqua were making a ruckus, imagining Darkness sacrificing herself to that pervert lord. Meanwhile, Megumi returned with a black cat she called Chamusuke, which Kazuma could pet but turned into a scratching fury for poor Aqua. She asked him what the fuss was all about, and Kazuma decided to put on his best Darkness impression, right in front of the pervert lord. Megumi got worried, and Kazuma instructed them to be nice to Darkness when she returned. As they contemplated Darkness as the victim, the prosecutor arrived at Kazuma's mansion. Megumi's explosion had disturbed the hibernation of a giant toad, and now they were ordered to clean up the mess. The toad was hot on Aqua's heels, and Kazuma was content to spectate. Megumi told them they needed to get stronger, all while half of her body ended up in the toad's mouth. Kazuma tried to save her, but she stopped him because it was too cold outside. Thanks to all her explosions, she had only managed to slow down one toad. As Aqua continued to be chased by the toad, Kazuma aimed his bow at it but failed to inflict any damage. The toad swallowed Aqua, but she was rescued by Kazuma. The prosecutor questioned if this was a regular occurrence, just as 3 more giant toads hopped their way. Panic ensued as they argued about who should be the decoy this time. As they halted their squabbling, both the prosecutor and Aqua were devoured by the toads. They struggled inside the toads' bellies, with Aqua screaming and the prosecutor moaning, perhaps due to the toads' magical tongues. Just when things seemed hopeless, another girl arrived and swiftly dispatched all the toads. The girl introduced herself optimistically as Union, an arch-wizard and master of advanced magic. Megumi told Kazuma about Union's presence with a stoic expression. Kazuma introduced himself, and Union seemed surprised that he didn't find her name laughable. Kazuma decided to tease Megumi about her even weirder name, which promptly started a quarrel between them. Union challenged Megumi to a duel, but she declined, citing the freezing weather. Eventually, after some persistence from Union and a little ego baiting, Megumi accepted her challenge, not in magic but in martial arts, where Union was skilled. Union appreciated Megumi's bravery and recalled a time when Megumi had challenged her to a lunchtime duel. Kazuma couldn't help but stare at Megumi with irony as she justified her lunchtime challenges as a means of survival due to personal circumstances. They assumed fighting stances, but to make things even more interesting, Megumi's body glistened with toad slime, which significantly dampened Union's enthusiasm. Union ran, and Megumi chased after her, employing some clever tactics. Returning home, Kazuma decided to take a bath, but Megumi halted him, insisting that ladies should go first. Kazuma, with a cheeky grin, proclaimed his yearning for true gender equality. A battle of wits and wills ensued outside the bathroom, with Kazuma eventually stripping down to his underwear with a tiny hole in it. Megumi also struggled to undress, and while Kazuma didn't mind taking a bath together, Megumi resisted, at least until Kazuma taunted her enough to agree. As they shared the bath, they discussed Union. Just as they were deep in conversation, Aqua returned to the mansion, and the bathroom door was unlocked. Kazuma, lacking the strength to stand, fell to the ground, relieved that he had avoided being labeled a lolicon. However, Megumi had other plans and cracked her knuckles in response to his earlier comment. Kazuma began to scream for help as Aqua called him a pedo neat. The next day, they visited the Wiz shop to discuss Kazuma's debt. Inside, they encountered Union, who had been waiting for them since morning. Predictably, Union and Megumi started arguing again. Megumi, being limited to explosion magic, declined Union's challenge to a magical duel and instead honed her explosion magic skills for faster spell casting. Aqua suggested a magic item to deepen their friendship. The challenge was simple: whoever could activate the crystal would win. As they attempted to activate it, it revealed their most embarrassing memories. Megumi's involved her insatiable appetite, including devouring a bus, while Union's showed her lonely childhood. Megumi, mortified, shattered the crystal, and Wiz packed it away as part of their debt. Megumi blamed Union for the mishap and declared that she would pay for it. They called the duel a draw. Union confessed that she wasn't a child anymore, especially since she was in a relationship with Kazuma, where they even bathed together. This revelation shocked Union and the shopkeeper. Kazuma couldn't resist taking a jab at her for attempting to tarnish his reputation further. Union left in tears, admitting defeat, while Megumi recorded another win in her notebook with an evil smile. Despite still being under suspicion, Kazuma's daily routine continued, even on rainy days, stormy days, snowy days, and peaceful evenings. Why he kept at it, he couldn't even say. One day, they found themselves at a bar, stomachs growling. Megumi and Kazuma were bickering about going into a dungeon. Megumi wanted no part of it, declaring herself completely useless both inside and outside dungeons. She couldn't even use her beloved explosion magic. Kazuma, however, had a brilliant idea: she could be the bag carrier. Their side jobs weren't cutting it to clear their debts, but Kazuma had a pamphlet for Keel's dungeon. One of their guild friends mentioned that a new passage had been discovered there, and a large-scale quest was about to escort a survey team. Treasure might be involved, and as soon as the word treasure escaped their lips, another guild member pounced with curiosity. Kazuma bribed him with a coupon, and he scurried away. Finally, they had a shot at some real money, and Kazuma couldn't afford anyone messing it up. They arrived outside the dungeon and set up camp, far away from the city. Megumi was contemplating using her explosions freely, but Kazuma reminded her they were going underground. Kazuma took the lead, utilizing his thief skills, enemy detection, lurk ability, and foresight to navigate and avoid potential threats. Aqua followed closely and confided in Kazuma that she had an alter ego as an archpriest. Despite having lost some of her powers among mortals, she still had godlike abilities up her sleeves. As they moved forward, they stumbled upon an empty chest, raising Kazuma's suspicions about Aqua. They eventually reached a secret passage, hearing menacing monster roars echoing through the dungeon. They teased each other about fear, with Aqua telling Kazuma not to think about grabbing her cakes and running away. As they joked about ditching each other in the depths of the dungeon, they heard something approaching. Kazuma gestured for them to hide, but Aqua didn't catch on. Suddenly, a low-level demon gremlin attacked from behind, but they managed to defeat it. Aqua had the power to see in darkness as clearly as in daylight. As they continued, they encountered a dead skeleton that scared them half to death. Aqua used a magic spell to release the adventurer's trapped soul, mocking Kazuma for being startled by a mere skeleton. He was seriously considering ditching her at this point. They explored various rooms, and as Aqua spotted a treasure chest, she rushed toward it. Kazuma stopped her and threw a rock at the chest, causing a massive mouth to appear from the wall and swallow the rock whole, terrifying them both. Aqua went on a rampage, freeing the souls of undead monsters and turning the dead creatures into corpses, releasing their souls. Kazuma became suspicious of Aqua's actions and confronted her. She sensed something undead still lurking and sniffed around, but couldn't locate it. Suddenly, a magical door appeared and a corpse began speaking. The corpse claimed to be Keel, an evil wizard who had built the dungeon and kidnapped a noble's daughter. He revealed his backstory, including proposing to the noble's daughter and becoming a lick to protect her. Aqua completed the purification ritual, and Keel thanked her. He told her that when he woke up, he would meet a goddess named Eris with unnaturally large breasts, who would help him reunite with his beloved. Both corpses vanished, and with Keel's treasure in hand, they left the chamber. Kazuma then confessed that Aqua had been unknowingly attracting the undead all along. As they argued, a large crowd of undead creatures appeared. Kazuma decided to use his lurking ability to hide behind a pillar, leaving Aqua alone to handle the horde. When they finally returned to the dungeon entrance, Aqua began weeping and confided in Megumi about everything. The two of them started arguing, and they decided to return to the guild to celebrate. Megumi wanted a beer, but Kazuma denied her, claiming she was too young. Inside the guild, everyone was enjoying their drinks. They asked Kazuma to perform his famous trick, and he promptly swiped a girl's panties as she entered the door. Chaos ensued, and Kazuma reveled in his mischief. Union entered the scene, challenging Megumi to a beer drinking contest. Megumi gladly accepted, but just as she was about to pick up her glass, a drunken guild member trying to copy Kazuma's panty stealing technique crashed into her table, spilling all the drinks. Megumi's hopes of beer were dashed. Aqua was busy fixing Kazuma's tracksuit, which she had thrown into the fireplace after he punched her hard on the head, leaving her with a comically large lump. Her day had taken a turn for the worse due to her reckless spending on booze, leaving her now starving and teary-eyed. As she turned to Kazuma with tears streaming down her face, she spotted him clutching her precious bubble wine bottle, the one she had hidden under her bed. He had the audacity to suggest selling it for some much-needed cash. This sparked a furious fight over the bottle, but Kazuma didn't stop there. He snatched her goddess raiment, her very identity as a goddess. Aqua begged him to return it, but he remained stubborn. Just as despair seemed to be setting in, darkness returned in formal feminine clothing that left them all bewildered. None of them recognized her at first, but as she began to gesture seductively, the truth slowly dawned on them, and they treated her as if she had fallen victim to some lord's perversity. Aqua enthusiastically leaped forward, hugging darkness and rubbing her face between her ample melons while crying about Kazuma stealing her most intimate possession. Darkness clarified that the Lord hadn't taken liberties with her but instead showed her a photo of the Lord's son, with whom a marriage had been arranged in exchange for leniency during her trial. Her father had agreed to the marriage, but she wanted to prevent it and had come to seek their help. Looking for an advantage, Kazuma surprisingly suggested that she should accept the marriage proposal, which infuriated everyone. If she rejected the proposal, the Lord would become unreasonable, but if she accepted and then ruined it, it might work. As they considered the plan, Darkness couldn't help but feel bad for her old man. The prosecutor suddenly appeared, inquiring whether Kazuma knew anything about the strange monsters outside the town, and he had to go with them. Megumi initially refused but eventually relented, and Kazuma encouraged her to showcase her explosion skills. She agreed and left with them, leaving Kazuma and Aqua to visit Darkness's home. At Darkness's house, she informed her father that she intended to accept the marriage proposal, while Kazuma and Aqua struggled to control their laughter at her formal behavior. Both of them were dressed as a butler and maid, as her father had asked them to take care of her, promising rewards if the meeting went well. While they waited for the guests to arrive, Darkness suddenly dropped her formal facade and began laughing wickedly. She informed her father that she planned to ruin the marriage, but Kazuma intervened by suggesting that she should accept it. Everyone was taken aback by this unexpected twist, as it turned out that her father had come to reject the marriage proposal. Darkness revealed her true intentions, stating that she didn't want to get married even if it meant being disinherited. She expressed a desire for a husband with toxic qualities and even some toxic features like Kazuma or even yourself. Her unconventional demands left them all speechless. She went as far as wanting to be treated like a prostitute, or even worse. When the guests arrived, Darkness was in the middle of speaking, but Kazuma used his freezing magic to throw her off track. Frustrated, she challenged him to a duel in the training ground, but he refused. However, after observing her peculiar behavior, Walther, one of the guests, developed an interest in her and wanted to see her fight. Kazuma reluctantly agreed, and the duel began. Darkness was repeatedly defeated, and Walther, impressed by her perseverance, dropped her sword to show his sympathy. Kazuma then asked her to demonstrate her ruthlessness and depravity, and she obliged, with her behavior growing increasingly bizarre. Walther and Kazuma watched as Darkness put on a spectacle, and Kazuma threatened to take things to even more depraved levels. Darkness continued with her seductive antics, moaning and wiggling her body, which made Walther feel shy and uncomfortable. She even began fantasizing about perverted things entirely on her own, ultimately fainting in a seductive manner. As her father entered with a wine bottle, he was left utterly speechless by the situation. Aqua tried to blame both Kazuma and Darkness for the chaos, and her father, overwhelmed by it all, ordered the execution of both of them. Her father continued to converse with them while Darkness lay on the sofa. Walther informed her father that if it weren't for Kazuma, he would have married her. Kazuma wanted to confront him, but Aqua held him back. Her father then asked Kazuma to take care of his daughter. As Darkness woke up, she mischievously lied that she was pregnant with Kazuma's child, which hit a nerve with the ultra-pro virgin. Walther, shocked, left while declaring he would speak to his father. Aqua was in disbelief and eager to spread the news, while her father cried tears of joy at the prospect of his first grandchild. As Kazuma attempted to clarify the situation, the prosecutor arrived, asking for him. The chaos was far from over. As the prosecutor grilled Kazuma about the recent monster incidents in the city, both Megumi and Darkness were as clueless as a cat at a dog show. However, Kazuma decided to consult Aqua, and much to his chagrin, he uncovered that the protective circle she'd conjured to purify Keel had inadvertently played matchmaker for the monsters and the city. Frustration bubbled up within him, and he gave Aqua a head punch that turned her noggin into a comically large lump, as if she'd auditioned for a role as a cartoon character. Upon reaching the dungeon's entrance, they were greeted by these pint-sized masked minions. One of those little critters latched onto Aqua's leg, but instead of a heartwarming hug, it exploded like a firework on the 4th of July. Oddly enough, Darkness kept her cool, strutting ahead like she was on a leisurely stroll through a park filled with daisies. Aqua and Megumi decided to stay put, leaving just Kazuma and Darkness to embark on their subterranean adventure. Observing Darkness's behavior, Aqua's mind started wandering into some rather risque territory, earning her the prestigious title of Goddess of Perversion. Inside the dungeon, they encountered these explosive minions, each smaller than a popcorn kernel, but Darkness was gleefully hacking them to bits with her sword. Kazuma was on edge, guarding Aqua's purifying circle like it was the last piece of chocolate cake at a diet convention, knowing it would put another bullseye on his wanted poster. Upon reaching Keel's lair, they stumbled upon a masked man crafting exploding dolls. The masked man introduced himself as Vanir, a bigwig in the Demon King's crew and a Duke of Hell. Kazuma contemplated a tactical retreat, but Darkness, with all the bravado of a knight in shining armor, insisted on facing Vanir head-on. She challenged him with the audacity to take on someone who claimed to outmuscle the Demon King himself. Vanir spilled the beans about his grand plan, harvesting the dark emotions known as darkness from humans, their favorite emotional snack. He got a kick out of creating these emotions and wanted to kick the bucket after constructing a dungeon that would bamboozle adventurers. Inside the chest at the end of this labyrinth, they'd find a message that read, "You lose." His goal? To prank them like an otherworldly joker, and he'd been squirreling away money for this quirky dungeon project. But here's the twist, Aqua's protective circle was his kryptonite. It allowed him to tap into their most embarrassing thoughts, even when they were in full denial mode. Vanir had a strict no-kill policy for humans but was more than happy to pick on Aqua. Darkness couldn't stand for that, so she launched an attack, while Kazuma and Darkness exchanged bewildered glances. Despite taking multiple swings, Darkness couldn't land a punch. When Kazuma tried a sneaky maneuver, he tripped and ended up hugging Vanir by mistake. This curveball gave Darkness an opening to strike. But then, Vanir did a quick magic trick and turned into clay. Just when they thought the show was over, Vanir's mask latched onto Darkness's face, attempting to puppeteer her. As Darkness resisted, Vanir was seriously impressed by her determination. Meanwhile, Kazuma sneaked into the chamber and deleted the circle while eavesdropping on their conversation. Darkness seemed to be getting a kick out of the pain Vanir was inflicting on her. When Kazuma emerged from the chamber, Darkness pointed her sword at him, but she was still in a tussle with Vanir's mental grip. Vanir got tired of playing puppeteer and wished he'd never started. As they left the chamber for Aqua to purify Darkness and exorcise Vanir, he gave Kazuma a warning. Darkness would be in for some serious agony. Much to his bewilderment, Darkness appeared to relish it. With full control over her, Vanir took a step forward. Outside, Vanir confronted Aqua with the promise of unimaginable suffering. She begged Kazuma for help, and he decided to stir the pot by taunting Darkness, who was still putting up a valiant fight. As Kazuma prepped his seal magic, Darkness revealed her ace in the hole. She challenged Vanir to a game, offering something utterly absurd if she won. This piqued Vanir's curiosity. Finally, Darkness was ready to roll the dice. She launched an attack on the mask, trying to light it up like a Christmas tree, but it didn't budge. Darkness shifted gears and asked Aqua to go all in with an attack. When that didn't cut it, she summoned Megumi to use her explosion magic, like a dynamite-powered wake-up call. Darkness gave Vanir two options, purification or saying goodbye to this world. To their astonishment, Vanir eagerly chose the latter, having had his fill of the darkness experience. Kazuma gave the green light to Megumi, and the prosecutor, who had been watching like a hawk, witnessed Megumi conjure the most colossal explosion this side of the universe. The blast cleared Kazuma of all suspicion and earned him a letter of gratitude from the town for taking down a demon bigwig. Darkness, battered but not broken, received a new suit of armor since her old one had gone up in smoke. She was pretty banged up but was saved by Aqua's healing magic. everyone decided to drop the formalities and address Darkness by her real name, which turned her beet red. Kazuma's debts were wiped clean, and he found himself with a cool 40 million heiress. Overwhelmed by his newfound wealth, Kazuma celebrated like a kid in a candy store, complete with silly dances and everything. After claiming their reward, their supplies magically reappeared, and they came to a startling realization. Their friend Wiz, the pawn shop owner, was also associated with the Demon King. With a heavy heart, they decided to pay Wiz a visit to break the news of their dear friend Vanir's demise. Little did they know, they were in for a mind-boggling surprise. As they pushed open the door to Wiz's shop, they were met not by Vanir's ghost but by the very much alive Vanir himself. The shockwave of this revelation hit them like an earthquake measuring 9.9 on the Richter scale. This encounter also triggered a flood of guilt in Darkness's mind for her involvement in Vanir's apparent death, which left her feeling utterly embarrassed. Kazuma, ever the comforting soul, attempted to soothe her frazzled nerves. Intrigued and baffled by Vanir's return from the brink of explosion, Kazuma couldn't resist asking the obvious question, why was Vanir still alive? It turned out that Vanir had undergone a rebirth, signified by the Mark II on his mask. Wiz explained that Vanir had grown tired of his role as a commander and recognized Kazuma's unique status as someone from another world. Vanir proposed a lucrative business opportunity, import and export between their worlds. Kazuma's role was to handle the creation and development, while Vanir would manage manufacturing and distribution. The first product of this venture was the kotatsu he was currently lounging under. Their attempts to coax Vanir out of the kotatsu turned into a comedy of errors. Kazuma, sly as ever, used his freeze breath on Darkness's neck, making her act like a pregnant cat scratching someone. When Megumin tried to lift the blanket, he used his drain touch to give her a headache. All of this was a bluff to remind them not to underestimate the one who had defeated Vanir and other formidable foes. Aqua, hiding behind the sofa, observed Kazuma's wicked antics with a mix of fascination and fear. Suddenly, she felt an urgent need to use the bathroom and asked the others to carry her, declaring a temporary ceasefire. In a hilarious turn of events, they ended up picking up both Aqua and the kotatsu and tossing them out of the window. With their bizarre encounter behind them, Kazuma took his friends to a blacksmith shop, excited to show them a katana. To his surprise, no katanas were featured in any anime yet. The blacksmith, who had been learning forging skills from an old master, presented Kazuma with a full plate armor that left him thoroughly impressed. As he tried to put it on, his friends urged him to pose with a sword, but he found himself unable to move even an inch. His attempt to make a heroic exit resulted in a comedic mess, leaving everyone in stitches. Later, while dining at the guild, Megumin couldn't resist poking fun at Kazuma's short katana, likening it to an Asian PP. Kazuma's disappointment with the name Chunchumaru was palpable. He worried that if he were to defeat the Demon King, he'd be forever associated with this peculiar weapon, and his heroic legacy would be forever tarnished. Their next quest involved eliminating a group of lizard runners, but as always, Aqua managed to mess things up, drawing the attention of the entire lizard runner horde. Blaming Aqua for their predicament, the party was in disarray as they attempted to deal with the situation. Megumin stepped up to the plate but quickly ran out of stamina and got flattened, while Darkness also found herself underfoot. Amidst the chaos, Kazuma managed to snipe the Lizard King, but the Queen dodged his arrow and lunged at him in midair. The Queen met her demise, but not before crashing into Kazuma, causing him to break his neck and lose consciousness. In this strange state of unconsciousness, Kazuma encountered a peculiar younger sister of Aqua, who informed him about his friend's efforts to heal his broken body. As they finished healing him, they encouraged him to return to the land of the living. But Kazuma had other ideas. He expressed a desire to be reborn as a man with a younger stepsister and an older stepsister, hinting at newfound feelings for Eris. However, Megumin's peculiar actions scared him back into reality, and he urgently requested that Eris open the gate to send him back. With tears in their eyes, Darkness and Megumin bid Kazuma farewell, while Aqua, with her usual flair, told him not to ask any questions. As Kazuma returned to his mansion and stepped into the bath, he was in for yet another bizarre surprise. Written on his belly was a message that left him screaming in both shock and hilarity, the holy sword of Excalibur, humorously pointing toward his private parts. Kazuma and Aqua's sudden transformation into the epitome of politeness was like watching a penguin try to waltz, amusing and slightly unsettling. Megumi, in a nervous fit, couldn't help but say sorry for that embarrassing belly message she'd written for Kazuma. But oh boy, Kazuma's newfound niceness. It was as odd as a cat trying to meow like a dog, and it only made Megumi's spine shiver even more. She begged him to snap out of it, but he persisted in his overly courteous ways. And then, like a cherry on this bizarre cake, Darkness chimed in with tales of Kazuma's wicked revenge plot against her. You could almost see the imaginary villain mustache forming on Kazuma's face. Darkness, cheeks flushed like a tomato in a sauna, couldn't resist asking what diabolical plan Kazuma had in mind. Just when things couldn't get any weirder, there was a knock at the door. Kazuma assumed it was Megumi, but guess who waltzed in? None other than Vanir, the chaos merchant himself. This surprise guest sent Aqua into a verbal fireworks display. It was like watching two cats trying to out-hiss each other. Kazuma, in a moment of genius, created a clone of himself, dodging Aqua's attack like a ninja. After the verbal battle royale, they switched gears and started discussing business deals. Vanir, the money maestro, reviewed Kazuma's proposals, dangling a patent worth 300 million and a monthly royalty of 1 million. Aqua and Darkness, with dollar signs in their eyes, couldn't resist joining the negotiation party. Vanir, with the grace of a dancing elephant, gave Kazuma some time to mull it over. Meanwhile, Megumi, the valiant soul, tried to stir their heroism spirits. But it was like trying to teach calculus to a squirrel. Her words fell on deaf ears. Darkness, on the other hand, was calculating how much of a scoundrel Kazuma could become with each passing moment. They eventually settled on a trip to Reincarnated, the hot spring haven, and both Kazuma and Aqua were game. They packed their bags, eagerly waiting for Darkness and Megumi. In a visit to Vanir about the hot springs trip, he suggested bringing along Wiz. But here's the kicker, Wiz started fading away like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. And what did Kazuma do? He jokingly grabbed Darkness by the neck, as if she were a chicken ready for dinner, and used his drain touch to revive Wiz. As Darkness came to, she saw Kazuma being whacked like a pinata at a birthday party. Seated in the wagon, they decided to settle things with a game of rock, paper, scissors. But Kazuma seemed to have a supernatural connection to victory, like a professional rock, paper, scissors champion. Aqua's frustration was brewing like a storm, leading to a showdown between her and Kazuma. The rest of the group watched in awe, like spectators at a gladiator match, as Aqua fumed in the back seat. As their journey continued, some monsters got attracted to the metal in Darkness's armor. The team sprang into action, with Darkness facing off against Kite Hawks. The hired adventurers cheered her bravery, while Kazuma struggled not to burst into laughter. One of them used bind magic on the Hawks, but Darkness seemed oddly delighted, reveling in the pain. Kazuma had to apologize to the adventurers for their rather unique Crusaders' antics. A thrilling speed game was underway, where competitors charged headlong at an obstacle at full speed, only dodging at the very last second to demonstrate their courage. Darkness, ever passionate about putting herself in harm's way, eagerly awaited the moment when the speeding Hawks would narrowly miss her. As they soared above her at the last possible moment, she couldn't help but feel a teasing sensation, intensified by Aqua's blessing magic. While the other adventurers tried to fend off the Hawks, Kazuma asked if there was a nearby cave. Megumi and Aqua opted to ride in the wagon, while Darkness, with a rather unusual request, asked Kazuma to tie her with a rope and drag her, essentially attempting to break every bone in her body. Unbeknownst to her, a group of Hawks was irresistibly drawn toward her. While the other wagons made their escape, their wagon continued toward the cave, with Darkness deriving pleasure from the pain she was enduring. Aqua and the others looked on with sarcastic eyes, wondering why Kazuma was subjecting her to this ordeal. As the Hawks closed in, Wiz came to their rescue, using her swamp magic to divert the Hawks' attention. Darkness was pushed to her limit, and Kazuma requested support magic from Aqua. The cave was finally in sight, and with a sharp turn, Kazuma threw Darkness at the cave's entrance, causing one of the Hawks to leap over her and enter the cave. Megumi seized the opportunity and unleashed her explosive magic, eliminating the threat. As night fell, the cavern leader praised their bravery, but Kazuma couldn't shake the guilt he felt for causing the trouble. When they were offered a reward, he awkwardly declined, both he and Darkness shedding tears of remorse for the ordeal. The next morning, Kazuma found himself fixing Darkness's breastplate while Aqua demonstrated her magic skills. However, their peaceful rest was interrupted when Aqua's holy aura attracted zombies to their location. Kazuma felt even more guilty for causing trouble once again, and as the entire cavern awoke to the zombie threat, they joined forces to defend themselves. Aqua, in particular, had an eerie and unsettling reaction, laughing wickedly and turning the zombies into undead. The cavern residents praised her once more, unaware that she had been the root cause of the problem in the first place. Outside their mansion, Union waited for Megumi every day with new challenges, but no response came from within. Meanwhile, our adventurers had arrived in the beautiful city of Water, a place where elves and dwarfs coexisted. They discussed the city's attributes and decided to disembark. As they stepped down from their wagon, Aqua informed them that this city was the home of the Axis Church, the very faith she had blessed. Kazuma was worried about encountering more eccentricities like Aqua within the church's followers. Some Axis Church priests approached them, but they quickly escaped and booked a room at an inn, fearing that Aqua might stir up some trouble. Kazuma's worries proved to be valid when Aqua, accompanied by Megumi and Darkness, ventured out to visit the Axis Church. Along the way, they encountered a lady who initially flirted with Kazuma but soon launched into a toxic preaching session. Darkness attempted to calm the lady by revealing her pendant of Eris, but this only infuriated the lady, who spat in disrespect of Eris. Kazuma explained that Axis and Eris churches were not on good terms, but her spitting strangely triggered Darkness's pleasure, leaving everyone bewildered. As they continued their exploration of the city, they came across another priest who pretended to be harassed by so-called Eris followers aiming to defame Eris. Awkwardly, Kazuma and Darkness chose to ignore the situation and tried to walk away, but the lady followed them, offering a joining letter for the Axis Church. As she showed her pendant, they walked away, once again spitting and turning on Darkness. Kazuma gazed at her hopelessly. Their encounters with various preachers left them feeling sick, and they sought refuge in a bar. The waiter quickly discerned that Darkness was associated with the Eris cult and handed a drink to Kazuma while serving Darkness in a rather degrading manner, even giving her a bone in a dog bowl. Surprisingly, Darkness seemed to relish being treated poorly and asked Kazuma if they could stay there. In a nearby alley, they encountered a young girl who tripped and fell. As they helped her and tended to her wounds, she asked Kazuma for his name, seemingly the only person in the city not talking about the Axis Church. However, her request for his name turned out to be an Axis Church joining form, causing Kazuma to lose his patience and tear the paper into pieces. Enraged by his encounters at the Axis Church, Kazuma stormed into the church, determined to speak to the person in charge. To his surprise, he found that the person in charge was also a rather eccentric girl. Kazuma didn't want to resort to violence, so he asked her if a magical girl and an archpriest had visited the church. In response, she pointed to a trembling and fearful Megumi in the corner, which shocked Kazuma. Outside, children were pelting Darkness with rocks, and to her delight, she found pleasure in their actions. Kazuma asked her to remove her Eris pendant, but she refused. Meanwhile, Aqua found herself in the confession chamber, fully immersed in her character. Kazuma tried to talk to her, urging her to control her followers, who were becoming a nuisance for tourists. Aqua, still deep in character, demanded that he leave. However, just as he was about to exit, he pretended to have a confession, piquing Aqua's curiosity. She wanted to hear what he had to say, but instead, he confessed to drinking her favorite wine, breaking her favorite cup, and seeking another priest, all of which infuriated her. She grabbed him by the neck and threw a tantrum, and Kazuma had to work hard to calm her down. In the confession chamber, an elderly individual confessed that a portrait of Eris was seducing him, with its large breasts being particularly alluring. Aqua advised him to like smaller breasts and love anyone except for demons, offering a bizarre solution that made little sense, much like her own existence. As they returned home, Megumi appeared depressed, and Darkness expressed a desire to go sightseeing the next day as well. Kazuma announced his intention to take a bath 3 times, but no one responded, leading him to believe he was being deliberately ignored. As he entered the bath, his lustful gaze made an elf girl who was also in the mixed bath uncomfortable. Another man, who was equally tired of Axis preachers, was present in the bath as well. Just as they were starting to relax, the preachers appeared, attempting to sell them soap. As Kazuma relaxed again, he overheard Megumi and Darkness talking negatively about him, fully aware that he would hear them in the mixed bath. However, when they realized he wasn't listening, they started speaking highly of him, even adopting a seductive tone, which tempted him to peek. As he peered through a hole, Megumi gestured, and Darkness punched him hard, sending him tumbling into the pool. They began throwing things at each other, with Megumi even tossing Chamyasuk, leaving Kazuma feeling sorry for the unfortunate creature for having such a wild owner. In the evening, Aqua was crying in Wiz's lap, but her tears were causing pain to the kind-hearted Wiz. She had been kicked out of the church because, due to her presence, the hot bathwater had inexplicably turned cold. Aqua had a conspiracy theory that the Demon King was behind the cold hot springs, and she sought their help. However, they refused her request, deeming it too lame. Megumi and Kazuma were enjoying the pleasant weather when they were startled by Axis preachers, who frightened them. As they tried to escape, Kazuma witnessed another person who was also fed up with Axis preachers and angrily threw something into the river. It turned out to be Wiz, who approached Kazuma and informed him that she had recovered. Meanwhile, Aqua was addressing a huge crowd about her conspiracy theory involving the Demon King. Two Axis church priests disparaged her as a pain in the butt who was turning hot springs into hot water. The crowd grew furious and began protesting, rejecting her claims that she was Aqua, the goddess of water. Even a child preacher called her a liar, which broke her heart. Later that night, back at the inn, she was crying and throwing tantrums while they tried to comfort her. In the distance, they could hear the protesters chanting against Aqua, holding fire sticks and Axis cult banners, as they referred to her as a witch. They hightail it out of the inn and dive into a sketchy alley like they're auditioning for a hide-and-seek championship. But lo and behold, they stumble upon her again. Panic stations. They make a daring escape to the local church, but the bouncers at the door are like, "Sorry, you ain't on the guest list." She tries to sweet-talk her way in, but let's just say her charm didn't get an invitation. Then, out of nowhere, our hero Kazuma steps up to the plate and drops the bombshell that darkness is basically nobility, like the posh dustiness family kind. He even pulls out the old show us your pendant trick, and darkness is like, "No way, Jose." But Aqua and Megumin don't take no for an answer and practically drag that pendant out of her, while Wiz watches this whole circus in pure awkward disbelief. Finally, they're allowed in, but darkness is not happy about it. Kazuma, the smooth talker he is, showers her with compliments, and she's about as easy to convince as a cat is to chase a laser pointer. Inside the church, they witness a rogue pipe recklessly dumping contaminated water into the hot spring. The poor victim from earlier is just standing there, and Kazuma, in his chivalrous frenzy, thinks he's about to take a dive into the spring of no return. But as he approaches, he realizes this guy's the real polluter. Wiz identifies him as Hands, but he's playing the whole who, me game. Wiz even tries to chat him up, but Kazuma steps in, katana drawn, and Megumin summons her trusty Chunchin Maru. Just when things are getting heated, Megumin blurts out that this Hands dude is the head honcho of the Demon King's army, and Kazuma's face turns whiter than a ghost in a snowstorm. He starts stammering like he's auditioning for a comedy club, while the others spill the beans about Hands' menacing reputation. Kazuma's sweating buckets, his heart's racing a marathon. And then he bolts, apologizing like a marathon runner. As they sprint away, they find themselves caught between the angry protesters and Hands. Kazuma's genius idea: abandon the water source and let the Axis cult fend for itself. Megumin's on board with this plan and dashes off to face Hands solo. The rest reluctantly follow her, and they're soon face to face with the slime monster. Hands nonchalantly reveals he devoured a real overseer, which sends Wiz into a fury. She decides to stay neutral to avoid collateral damage. She freezes Hands' hand, and as she approaches, he does the all trick of breaking his own hand and transforming into his true, terrifying form. He starts unleashing rapid attacks on everyone. Aqua rushes to save the spring, attempting to purify it. But the protesters, now realizing she was telling the truth, throw soap and detergent at Hands. Darkness warns them to stay clear, thinking it might be hazardous, and they respond by pelting her with soap. Megumin contemplates her signature explosion, but Aqua intervenes. The protesters try to replenish her stamina from afar, and Kazuma, the brains of the operation, notices some bones in the slime monster. This slime is a terrible digester. He asks Aqua if she can revive someone from bones, and Wiz can reduce its size. Kazuma then tells Megumin to prepare a small explosion. As the slime is about to attack Aqua, Kazuma distracts it while Megumin gets ready. The slime jumps after Kazuma off a cliff, reducing to bones. Megumin unleashes her explosive magic. Darkness saves a child from the poisonous slime. Wiz reduces its size by freezing it, but her powers run out. However, a small part of it still lives. Aqua swoops in and delivers a divine blow, struggling but fueled by the cheers of the protesters. With a final strike, she annihilates Hands. The battle's over, but Aqua's divine requiem turns the hot spring into boiling water. Everyone's pretty peeved at her now. They had to call a cart for their ride home, and they're welcomed back to Axel by a not-so-happy crowd. And wouldn't you know it, Union greets them at their mansion, and Megumin's already challenging her to a duel. Yep, everything's right back to normal. That concludes the recap of Konosuba. Make sure to push subscribe and let us know your thoughts. Now excuse me while I go find the closest tractor near me.
あの二人がやりました。よし処刑しろ。